Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first seminar in the 2023-2024 series with the Work and Learning Research Center. And we are a part of the Center for Education, Research, and Scholarship in the Education Department at Middlesex University. Dr. Tim Riley teaches at Middlesex University. And when I thought of some very interesting work and interesting people to start us off this year, Tim really came first in my list to do that. He's written some very interesting work about the degree apprenticeship that he's done, and he's going to tell us about a research article also that is available through a link through some of the materials. So I'm going to hand over, and I'm Dr. Paula Nottingham, and welcome today. Welcome everyone, and we will be sending you the slides after the presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Tim Riley.
Thanks, Paula. Today is titled Initiating Change, a degree apprenticeship for the creative industries. We've got a degree apprenticeship starting in January. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. But I've had to do quite a bit of research, background research for that to come to fruition. So I just wanted to, I think the initiating change, talking really about, I want to give some background research. So if I tell you the kind of five sort of sections we're going to go through. So first of all, I'm going to talk about creative industries and me, because I worked in the creative industry for 25 years. And there's certain things that I noted from that I think are quite important. I think it kind of gives a good context to where we are. Then I'm going to give degree apprenticeships overview. Now, I know that a lot of you probably already know this, so I'll skip through that, but I think it's only fair that we just cover that slightly, just so that everybody who may be here who doesn't know that a lot of the background to degree apprenticeship should, so they understand that. Then I'm going to go into and look at, the background research to developing the degree apprenticeship, creative industry research, and then the actual development and validation process and delivery. Well, we're going to start the delivery in January, obviously, of the BA Creative Digital Design Professional degree apprenticeship. And then at the end, we're just going to look at we're going to give an overview of the initiating change. So, first picture. We're going to go back to 1982. So this is an image of me when I was on the final year of my graphic design degree, and at Coventry Polytechnic. So that's 10 years before the Further Education Act of 1992, which turned all polytechnics into universities. And you can see here that, so I'm in my third year. This is a background from a video that I produced when I did a pop video for my final project. It's looking very moody. So one of the first jobs that I got, the first real job that I got, was actually in broadcasting, and it was in TVM. It was when TVM started. It was one of the first breakfast TV channels. It was the ITV version, so there's obviously the BBC version. And this is the back of this is the building designed by Terry Farrell in the Memphis style. So the building's still there actually, but it's been changed quite a lot. If you look at the back, the middle panel there, if you go to the back, you'll see that it still looks like that, because I think it's a listed thing. So you can still see the egg cups down in Camden. Down in Camden. The front's been changed quite a lot. It's now MTV, and it's all been turned up. The atrium area has all been turned into offices. But I've got a little inset for you here, which is quite it's an inset. So the person with the green scarf is me, and it's actually on picket line at the front of TVAM, because and I'm just going to talk about the precariousness in a minute of working in the creative industry. So this would be late 80s, during the kind of Thatcher era, when there was a lot of industrial action, and that's me on a still from me from an ITV lunchtime news broadcast. So I basically, most of my work was in motion graphics. So it wasn't actually called motion graphics in those days, but I used to do sort of, so I'd do idents for programs. I worked on a lot on title sequences, did quite a lot for the BBC actually. I was quite surprised when I was looking back how many I did. So how many I did. I also did quite a few pop promos at the same time in there. And obviously there was a lot of, I did quite a lot of corporate jobs as well. And a lot of those were kind of bread and butter things. I mean, the way that I found it was the more creative the job, the less money I used to get paid for it. So you had to do lots of, I remember did a corporate video for Matterson Walls about the change in EEC freezer cabinet foods, the temperature of freezer cabinet food, which was obviously not that exciting, but it enabled you to do more creative work. And obviously, you know, I used to use the trade press as well to publicise the work that I did, because I worked for myself for 7 years during that time. So I had my own kind of little business, which again was, you know, it's quite precarious, sort of, you know, making sure you got enough money to get by during that time. But obviously nowadays you wouldn't use the trade press probably. You'd just stick it on, you know, social media and do everything that way. So I want to show this. This is the last photo. This is the photo of, so the last job I did in the creative industries was I was a graphics manager. That's me on the left with my team of graphic designers. And this was the date at the bottom. I can tell that 6 months after this, we were all made redundant. And the redundancy was quite a sort of challenging, you know, it was quite a regular occurrence in the industry. On this particular occasion, it was because I was working for Pearson Television, and the contract for, so I worked in a creative, this team of that I was working for, I was working as a graphics manager. So that was my team behind me, and we worked on 5 to 6 different satellite broadcasting channels, so it was for creative services, and you know, so yeah, we were made redundant after that, about 6 months after that, because the contract that the organizer, the company I was working for, they lost the contract. So it meant that everybody who was working for that organization got made redundant. And I mean, so I would say, if I was going to do an overview of this, particularly the 25 years experience I've had, I'd say that it's a very precarious working in the creative industries, you know, particularly in broadcasting and motion graphics. It was a very precarious kind of type of employment. So during the 25 years, I had, as I said, one industrial action, which we were eventually sacked from, that was at TVAM, 2 redundancies, and then 7 years of self-employment. So during that period of time, there was it was a kind of bit of a roller coaster ride, I suppose, really, if you want to put it that way. But I mean, you know, what was there now is, you know, it's probably stretched even further now within the industry. I would imagine from the connections I still have. Frequent changes to working practices, continuous introduction of new technologies, and a constant need to update skills and knowledge. And particularly the new technologies, I would say that there was a kind of within the latter years, because obviously I joined the creative industry just on the cusp when digital technology was coming in. So the majority of it was analog, but as sort of it was a bit of kit called a paint box, Quantel paint box. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it was like a transition. It was the early transition, the start of the digitalization of the industry. And the new technologies just kept coming out, and he was a very advanced sort of, he's a very advanced, certainly the technology of working in broadcasting particularly. So when I got made redundant for the second time, I thought, right, I need to kind of, yeah, I left the industry in that sense, but I did a pivot. I didn't want to just, you know, all the experience I'd had, 25 years, I didn't want to just throw that all away. So I went and did my PGCE, then I went and did an MA in digital media, then I did a PhD, just looking at social media and things like that. And worked in a few other institutions. Obviously, started doing a bit of public, got some publications from my PhD and etc. from that, and so this is where I am now. So if we do a kind of review of that, then I was a student from 2006. I got made redundant in 2005. So 2006 was student for sort of reasonable period of time for 7 years. But I was also lecturing at the same time. So from 2009 to present, up to present, a lecturer. So when I entered higher education, obviously it was going to be unrecognizable from the previous era because, in 2000, when I left in 2008, I left with no debt, but I had free education. I didn't even know what tuition fees were because they were all paid by my local council, and I didn't even know how much they were. Nobody even told me about it. And obviously the structural changes to funding have had a big got big implications for the future of education, etc., and how we are. Also the commodification of higher education. But I think what's happened is it's given me a knowledge and experience of both creative industries and higher education. So for the 3 points that I would say that has helped me understand where we are, and is my obvious experience of the creative industries, my experience as being a mature student, obviously a student, but for a reasonable period of time, and then also my current role as lecturer at Middlesex. So I think we can't avoid looking at the higher education system at the moment. I need to just touch on this because it's a kind of big elephant in the room if we don't do it. The current higher education funding model is broken. I mean, it's what I find really strange about this is that the system that's been created is like everybody's a loser, and these so the stats, if you look at them for student debt, so this comes from the Commons Library, so this is actually from an accurate sort of source. Debts among the cohort of borrowers who started their course last year, will have a debt of an average debt of over £45,000 when they complete. And if we look at the university situation, it's 9,250 tuition fees frozen since 2007, and that's been estimated to be worth £6,000 with inflation, and the current freeze, obviously under the current government anyway, is set to last till 24-25. So it's not looking good on that situation. But also, I mean, we were talking about the taxpayer as well. And I mean, I think this, really is, the taxpayer is a real loser in this, that the government expects that around 27% of full-time undergraduates starting in 22-23 will repay their loan in full, which is incredibly low. And now I know that number's there's a prediction that it will go up to 61% under the new rules, but I mean, that's just a prediction, and we don't know whether that's going to happen. So, I just felt we just have to address that to show where we are at the moment. So, and I think that's one of the situations as we're thinking about degree apprenticeships now, universities need a more diverse offering that meets the needs of students and employers. And I think employers is a really important part of this. Opportunities to raise income from other sources, i.e., the levy fund, which I'll get onto in a minute, and address the decline in Eurozone students. I mean, certainly from my perspective in our faculty, we've noticed over the last year, we used to get a lot of students from on our traditional degree courses from Europe, and we don't get any now. I mean, they basically disappeared because of the funding for it, and so that's really impacted on the numbers that we're getting for our university for our courses. So So degree apprenticeships are employer-led. And we'll get a little bit more into that, as we get through this, and they provide an opportunity. It provides opportunities for universities to start building relationships with industry and employers. Now, I know a lot of universities already do that, but this is a kind of specific target through DAs that can happen. And one of the things that's really important, and I kind of looked at this in my research, which I'm going to get onto later, is that they've been proven to help social mobility and diversity in the workplace. And certainly in the creative industries, that's one area which we'll talk about later, which was in the research that I did was really high on the list of problems that people felt. So yeah, apologies to the people who already know about this, but I just feel I have to just do a quick overview of degree apprenticeships. So degree apprenticeships take place in the workplace. They're supported by learning providers. So in our case, Middlesex, we will be the learning provider for the creative digital design professional. They're paid for by the employer. We'll get onto the actual funding model in a minute, not the apprentices. Apprentices receive a wage from the employer, and they can't qualify for student loans. The standards, which are, I suppose, what you call a kind of curriculum, which I'll explain in more detail in a minute, they identify knowledge, skills, and behaviours, KSBs, required to be competent in the job roles duties. I think behaviours, I think I was talking to Paula earlier about this, is a real key one here as well, particularly. Employers and training providers need to meet 20% off the job training required for apprentices. Bit of a misnomer, is this off the job training, because that implies that you're going to leave the employer and go maybe 1 day a week somewhere. It doesn't have to be that. You can do your off job training in the workplace. It's just that the type of work that you're doing needs to be more based on actual study rather than work directly for your employer. Okay, so there's a tripartite review. So obviously it's all happening in the workplace, but we need to obviously check that apprentices are meeting on the requirements. So they will have 4 progress reviews per year as they do degree apprenticeship. And it's an opportunity to review the progress and identify any actions. And then right at the end, so after the 3 years, we're talking about degrees here, so a 3-year apprenticeship, there's an endpoint assessment, which is kind of like an exam, really. It basically it confirms that the apprentices are occupationally competent and that they've met all the KSBs, and then after that they're awarded their apprenticeship and degree. So just a little bit about the funding, because obviously I've spoken about the traditional funding at the moment. So the apprenticeship levy was introduced in 2017, and employers with a payroll of more than 3 million pay 1.5% annual bill into the fund. So then levy payers can get that money back from the apprenticeship levy by as a contribution for the costs of the apprenticeship programs. However, businesses that are below that, so they're kind of non-levy payers, they're eligible for government funding for up to 95%. So it's a kind of no-brainer for them. I mean, it's like a really good option. And as I'm going to get onto in a minute, the creative industries particularly has got a very high proportion of small and micro businesses. So the final one is a really good indicator for it. So the occupational standards, which is kind of like, as I've said, it's sort of equivalent for like your curriculum in that sense, is that it's developed by trailblazer groups, which are consortiums of employers who've identified an occupation for development. So training providers can, can also be invited to contribute to the development. So we're talking about degree apprenticeships here. Obviously, I want to get a bit more into it now. These are some of the reasons why I think they are kind of good, in that sense that they meet that one of the reasons why they were brought in the first place was that the government realized that actually employers were not spending very much money on training, and they wanted to try and increase that. That's obviously that's not just creative industries, that's across the board. So it's a sort of encouragement for them to start training more in-house. So they've been seen as a good value for money on that sense. As I've said, they enhance social mobility, but it also it helps the kind of connection between higher education, business, and it can really help certainly with regional connections, and also links between sort of lower level. So this is level 6. If you've got lower level apprenticeships, it can improve. There's a link between FE partnerships in there as well, and also we can't ignore it really, the post-Brexit income diversification. I would say that degree apprenticeships, because of their nature, they are Brexit friendly, if we want for a better term, in the sense that you can only really do an apprenticeship if you are I think your employer has to be in England and you have to be UK based as well for that. So it kind of is a little bit Brexit friendly. So is everybody a winner in this? Well, I mean, it certainly looks like that. We don't know again, I want to do some research about this when we've got the program running. But we can certainly look at apprenticeships. There's no tuition fees, obviously no debt. You're earning while you're learning. You're retaining a degree while in a workplace, using industry projects. All the up-to-date working practices you would be up to date with. Employers can develop and tailor occupational standard, develop to their business and industry. Partner with learning providers for apprenticeship educational support, which if you're a small micro business, then there's probably very little opportunity for you to spend time training your apprentices in that sense, because you've got your core business. Universities so provide a new income stream, opportunity to build relationships with industry and employers. And then obviously the taxpayer, there's very little. Now, I think we need to just say in here, because I put a question mark over this. Obviously, it's fairly obvious that we're going to get it's pretty likely that we're going to get a change of government. And I know that there's been quite a lot of criticism from employers about the apprenticeship levy and the strictness of it. And I think that when Labour come in, I think they're going to broaden this out so that the money because at the moment, when the money goes into the apprenticeship levy, you can only use it. It's very strict, the rules that you can use that money for. And I think that Labour will, they've indicated that they will broaden that out. And obviously we'll see how that works. But they're going to protect apprenticeships that are already running, as we see. But obviously we'll have to wait and see about that one. Okay, so just to finish this section off, really, I just wanted to. This is a fairly recent quote from a paper that's been written, "The Impact of Degree Apprenticeships: Analysis, Insight, and Policy Recommendations." Now, they do say that there's not a lot of research out there about degree apprenticeships at the moment. But what they have done, from what they have found out, is that degree apprenticeships are meeting the intended purpose of contributing positively to the UK government's higher level goals for productivity and social mobility. And they're an alternative route into higher education and serve as a vital talent pipeline, providing opportunities for young people, existing employers, and learners from diverse backgrounds. So according to this report, it's a peer-reviewed report, that so far things are looking good for them. Okay, so just a little bit about Middlesex University, because Middlesex already have quite a lot of degree apprenticeships in policing, in nursing, and in business. But there's none in the creative industry, in the art and creative industries. And I'm going to get onto that in a minute. One of the reasons maybe why that is, but I'm just going to run through some of these stats with you. You can see the stats here, what it is. So there's a Centre for Apprenticeship and Skills, which has been, I think it used to be a work-based learning Centre for Work-based Learning as well. So it's transitioned into that as these have moved on. So, and the figures, look good. So 59% of apprentices of Middlesex come from non-professional backgrounds, 66% of parents with either no formal degree qualifications, 53% female. There's a really good sort of diverse mix of groups there, and also there's quite a high proportion, obviously above 25% as well, and there's some very good retention rates there. Okay, and this is so the income as well for this has been building. This looks to forecast as sort of plateaued at the moment, but hopefully that will continue rising as we go through this. Okay, so that's kind of background. I want to just get now a little bit more into the research and development and validation of the course we've been doing. And so when I first started this, and I suggested to the faculty that they should maybe develop one, there actually weren't any. There were no occupational standards available. So we were talking about something that was a little bit abstract in the first place. So we didn't actually really have any. There was no product out there to do it, and we weren't developing one ourselves. So, before I actually get into it, I wanted to actually just talk to you a little bit, some anecdotal evidence that I've got from my 25 years working in industry, and I think this kind of relates to it before we actually get into the actual research. And it's runners with degrees. So throughout the 25 years, but particularly in the last few years, when obviously the tuition fees were still quite low at the time. The last place I worked at Pearson Television, what would happen is that they would have a vacancy for runners. So you'd need runners to help you, make tea, do errands for clients, etc., all the dog's body kind of work that you would do. So they would interview for those, and people who applied for them were people who had degrees in related arts, design, creativity subjects. So they'd already got the degrees, they'd already started to get they'd already got debt attached to this, and they would apply for a job and they'd be given a runner's job. So for the first 2 or 3 years, they'd have a degree, but they'd be making cups of tea and they'd be going out. And obviously there's a bit of resentment, which you can kind of understand from that, basically you've done a degree and I can't even get a job working in the industry. So there was this kind of bit of resentment there. And what they were expected to do was in downtime, so when all the equipment was not being used at night, to learn the equipment and how to do it, and then eventually hopefully get a sort of a kind of apprenticeship job within the industry, so it would be on a low wage, which seemed, for me at the time, I just thought, well, this seems really kind of strange. It's a strange way to do it. They've already trained in something, and yet they've been asked to go backwards in some ways. And also they've got some debt. I mean, I don't know how that would work nowadays. With such a high level of debt, I would imagine that would be even out of the, would be unavailable to a lot of the people who did it now. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about, people who already work in the industry, and there's a term probably a bit of a derogatory term of nepo babies that we keep hearing quite a lot of at the moment. But there is quite a lot of that in the industry. But I would say that, you know, if you're coming out of the arts at the moment, it's quite difficult to do. It must be with the high debt burden that you've got, probably, you know, out of the reaches of a lot of people doing that route. So okay, so I just want to talk about that because I thought it was quite interesting. I think it kind of relates to what we're talking about here as well. So getting into this, so before we actually get into the actual research that I did, because, you know, the faculty wanted me to do some research to kind of almost validate the reason for developing a degree apprenticeship. So just want to run through a couple of figures with you then about the creative industries. And so prior to COVID, creative industries contributed 116 billion, which is twice in 2019, which is growth, you know, twice as fast, growing twice as fast between 2011 and 2019, which is bigger than a lot of the UK economy as a whole. And, you know, during that, so July from 2020 to 2021 account for, you know, a large amount of jobs for that period. Self-employment accounts for 32% of the creative industries employment, compared with 16% for the economy more broadly. But this is the important bit here that I want to sort of that I've highlighted in red. In 2019, 95% of creative companies were micro businesses, so fewer than 10 employees, which is 6 percentage points higher than the rest of the UK economy. So when I was designing, you know, the title and the research methodology for this research, I thought it was really important that we did actually look at micro business, small and micro businesses, because it seemed to me that they were the ones that, you know, there was going to be a high proportion who potentially needed, you know, could really benefit from degree apprenticeships, but whether they were actually capable of being able to develop them. So in 2018, I had a research event, which is down in central London, and I invited, so it was actually the adoption of apprenticeships for small and micro businesses in the creative industries. As I say, the focus was particularly the non-levy payers who, you know, would not be paying into it, but could actually use the levy and draw down 95%. So it was a bit of an explain and respond. So that's how we kind of developed it. It was that, you know, obviously we were aware that a lot of people didn't understand how the system works. So I explained how the system worked. We had Daryl Bravenbauer, who is the head of the Centre for Apprenticeship and Skills. He was actually there. He did a talk. It was 3 sessions. And then we had a question, so it's a question and answer session, and then one-to-one interviews, which I used for the data for the research. So using qualitative research methods, and obviously there's a photo of me there trying to explain degree apprenticeships to everybody. So the results from that, and I mean, one of the key bits of this, I mean, one of the things that really came out really strongly in the data was that the creative industries suffer from a lack of diversity. You know, there's a really good quote here in the sense that in our creative industry, we want to reach the widest number of people possible, and you can only do that by having people that come from different walks of life. I don't necessarily mean ethnicity, although that's important, but for me, it's about having opportunities for working class kids because they bring a completely different perspective. And that is one of the things that, you know, this is just one quote of many, But this is one of the big themes that came through in the research, and it's about identifying that. And that was the same, I think, when I started in the industry, I was the first person in my family to work in the creative industries. It was difficult to get in there now, but I think it's probably even harder now to do that. And the second one, what a lot of employers were saying in this was that graduates were not behaviourally equipped for the workplace. And this is kind of quite a worrying sort of theme to bring up, really. There's a perception that graduates did not work hard enough to develop knowledge and experience or respond well to being given seemingly menial tasks. And we're not really talking about the runners here. We're not talking about, making cups of tea. That the perception was, with quite a few of the respondents, that, there's expectation that, they should be starting much higher up with their creativity within the industry. So some of the other themes that came up in this as well was the idea of the skills gap. And that they find it hard to fill a lot of the skills that they've got. And obviously, if you're thinking about micro businesses now, particularly, they've become a lot more niche as well. There's a lot more niche kind of skills and types of companies as technology's diversified, and as the amount of jobs within that have diversified too. So one of the main things was that DAs felt like they might be a way of attracting a different type of people into the company. Obviously, that's something I want to try and get an answer to when we've had sufficient period of time with the apprenticeship that's starting in January. Also, and I mean, this is kind of quite a worrying thing as well, was this cropped up quite a lot of times with the employers. Perception that traditional university model is not working. We were only talking to Paula before about earlier before the session started about the difference between sometimes universities still feel like the courses that they're doing are still kind of stuck in the industrial age, and they maybe haven't moved on to the information age. And this is kind of reflected, probably, it seems to be reflected in the comments here. Often people who are teaching used to be in the industry 20 years ago, and they're not really up to date with the top progressive end of science and what's actually happening. Now, we could argue that's not true, but that's the perception. And I've part the idea of doing anything with graduates as it's just not compatible with the business, not compatible commercially, and not compatible creatively. So we've got to remember that these are small micro businesses who basically are not really interested in certainly in employing graduates, because they've got to hit the ground running with a lot of the work. So to continue, I'm quite happy to take young people that don't have degrees and develop in the DA model. We have a strong training. So as I say, this particular person who I interviewed did have a strong training and development ethic, and they were training up runners as assistant editors, which is good to see. But it says nobody at university is going to teach, and this is obviously the perception, nobody at university is going to teach him or her how to do that. I'm interested in the idea that we can actually develop something new that would allow people to get a qualification while they're working for us and utilize the government funding. So there's a potential here for this particular company to benefit from the model of the degree apprenticeships. So this kind of fits in as well with this is some data. This is data I used at the time, so I've been able to find any updated data for this, so that this is where the dates are kind of quite old, but this is what I used for the paper at the time. 88% of businesses believe school leaders are unprepared for the workplace, but 54% consider that graduates are unprepared for the workplace, which is kind of, slightly concerning, really, in that sense. 76% believe that lack of workplace experience is the reason young people are unprepared for work. There's a real mismatch between employers' expectations during the recruitment process and young people's understanding of what is expected of them, particularly when it comes to presentation and preparation. And this is what, I talked to Paul about this earlier, the behavioural side of this, about understanding what is entailed by, working for an employer and the workplace. Integration. So people at the beginning, getting people in the beginning, building a relationship with them, learning and growing together. This seems to be a much better model than just trying to buy somebody at the end of a degree show. And this is from, this quote is from the managing director of a top motion graphics company in London. And what they do is they go and at the end of every year, they go to the degree shows and they, well, as I say, buy in somebody who they think, they look at their work and they say they're appropriate for our company, and they buy them in. But as we see from, there's a bit of research here back there that kind of looks at this, segmentation of employability. And we can see that, the buy model, so that particular model of going in and getting somebody from university, according to this research anyway, says that it's a 1 in 15 chance of success. Obviously, the best one is the buy model, which is a 1-to-1. Obviously, the degree apprenticeship works probably more appropriate to the buy and bill, which is a 1 in 4, which is still a much better sort of percentage there than that. So another theme that came through as well was growth in the business. I can see the potential of degree apprenticeships as to an organisation like ours. We're quite small and we're effectively 4 or 5 members of staff. But one of the things that we are looking for is bringing younger people in who might grow with the business and have particular training needs. So I could see the model fits. And I think this idea of growing with the business is very appealing to a lot of businesses. So obviously the apprenticeship model works well because they're in the workplace all the time, but they're learning from with the training alongside the training providers, the skills needed, knowledge, and behaviours needed to be proficient in the job role. Okay, so that's kind of the research side of it. So we, it was first produced as a report, and then it was developed into a paper, and that gave us a bit of information to keep going back to the deans of the faculty to try and persuade them that this is the right route to go down. It's worth pursuing, and I took this. This is basically looking at the occupational standards for degree apprenticeships in the creative design and digital occupations. And I took this one from last week. So you can see there's quite a lot coming online. So when I need to remind you again that when we first did this, we were first doing this, the top one on the right, which is the one that we've developed, the creative digital design professional, that was actually the only one that was really appropriate for the faculty, and that just came online in February 2020. So we were then in a position to be able to say, well, look, this is one that we can develop and it's right for the faculty. But you can see that a lot of others have come online now. There's a creative advertising creative just came online like last week. So there's a few more coming online, but there's still not, there's not really a great diversity at the moment. And, there needs to be much greater development of these. There are some that are in development. These are all level 6. There's quite a lot more at level 4 for this, but obviously for the degree side, we're looking at level 6. And this is the actual occupational standard that we've developed, and this is from the Institute for Apprenticeship who developed it. So you can see there's lots of different job titles in there. There's duties that each one of the apprentices is expected to learn throughout it. It's a 3-year course, which could be shorter, maybe depending on the assessment of prior learning. So this might help if you're upskilling and you've already been working in a job already. So, okay, we started the development. What changed this? So what actually changed it? What was the moment that the dean of the faculty said, okay, go on then, start your development of this? So there's a number of reasons. Obviously, the COVID actually benefited it in sort of odd way, because of the pedagogical practices that we developed. So the online learning, the adaptable teaching methods, we kind of proved within that year that we could run a course. Because one year we ran the whole course online. I'm sure there's lots of people here who did the same. So we kind of proved that could be done. So greater introduction of hybrid blended learning. Obviously, we proved that's kind of a similar kind of thing. Also, this idea that the admissions, as we've seen, were falling in a lot of the other courses, and we needed to think about another kind of avenue for bringing in students, apprentices. We already had the university infrastructure there as well, which was certainly developing with a lot of the other apprenticeships that from all the other particular from the Centre for Apprenticeship and Skills. And really, it was just down to persistence. I think that one of the things is, well, go and write another paper about it. And I'm going, well, I'm not writing another paper. This is about us. We need some action. We need to actually develop this now. So, and there were kind of, I would say there was maybe at the early stages, a little bit of a risk aversion to this, and maybe a few delaying tactics along the way. But anyway, this is how we develop the course. You can look at it here. This is the 360 credit. So this is taking the standard and then building it in a university model. So you'll see here that they're built into sort of 320 credit years, very similar to what you'd see in a traditional course program. And I think that if you look at this, so the first year is really, obviously, it's a foundational year where you're learning the fundamentals of what creative digital design is. And I think at this stage, probably I need to explain what I think creative digital design is. I think personally, it's a hybrid graphic designer. It's basically what a graphic designer really is morphed into. But it's probably working a lot more with maybe data than you would do with a traditional graphic designer. But to be honest, I don't really see there's a great deal of difference between, a digital designer and a graphic designer. We could argue around the edges of that, but there's certainly, I'm very familiar with this, and I think it's quite similar. So, and obviously, digital, I don't think it'd be very hard to be a graphic designer now and not be digital. So, to design digitally if you're a graphic designer. But if you look at the 3 years here, then we can see that the first year is really foundational. So that's learning, the first module is about how do you learn and study while you're at work. That's one of the most important parts. But then the rest of it's really about getting these foundational fundamental skills in design. Then the second year, I would say that you probably be getting to be become a bit more independent. So you would be able to help your employer in that sense. They'd be able to set you more projects. You'd be able to maybe work with teams. You'd be able to develop, actually maybe run a team, maybe manage a team, maybe be a team leader by your second year. And then the third year really is about you being much more independent and maybe being able to produce work that helps your employer, that that can see the business from a different perspective. So data stories, etc. That's the kind of rough idea of how I see it from a course point of view. And obviously these are some of there's 21 knowledge, there's 21 types of knowledge that you do. Have to summarize them here. There's different types of skills here. There's 18, which I've summarized into 6, and then there's 5 behaviors, which I've summarized here. And we can see there here on the right, if you just look down on the right hand side, you can see that the employers that were involved in the development in the Trailblazer group, and you can see that the funding for the 3 years is 25,000, which actually we got involved right at the end. The faculty got involved with the Trailblazer group right at the end to help help develop and get the £25,000 funding for that. Help work that out. Okay, so before we went to validation, I was asked by the dean before they wanted to have a bit more information. They wanted to check that what we'd proposed for this was actually what industry wanted. So we had a focus group, and a lot of the thing that came through this isn't in the paper, by the way. This is too late for the paper, and it was quite biased. I would say that the selection of the sample that we had there was probably quite biased, maybe more towards advertising than maybe the group that we had for the research event. But there were kind of similar kind of themes that came through that. Work-based learning, so learning on the job is always stronger than purely academic approach. That was the feeling of the focus group. Learning from practice in the workplace from a creative standpoint is the best way and perhaps the only way. University is limited in terms of the time you can give to concepts, whereas the work environment offers a healthy competition which aids learning. So again, there's certainly an emphasis on this idea of work-based learning is that employers feel is very valuable to them. Obviously, this thing about diversity, that they believe that they're certainly the focus group, and obviously backs up what was found in the research event. Apprenticeships are a great way of diversify the workforce as it attracts people that can't afford degrees, but also there's advertising. The advertising industry works in a particularly I would say strangely kind of dated way in the way that they look at things. And one person actually did say that the advertising industry to accept and hire apprenticeship will require a cultural shift, and I think that's the way that they interview for jobs, in the sense that a lot of people don't, a lot of them within that industry are not really bothered about degrees. But also it got me thinking as well. It's got us thinking about, we've been looking at the creative industries, but obviously I think this particular degree apprenticeship, and within the field, so creative digital design professional, I think that as well as looking at the creative industries, I think we need to look at the creative economy, and that's certainly been backed up by the companies that have signed up apprentices to the course that's going to start in January. So if you look at creative industries, obviously you'd be a creative industry company that's looking for that wants a creative job within that industry. But obviously we've got lots more, and particularly with the sort of digitalization of everything and the rise of social media, etc., the communication level that's needed. Most companies now need some kind of visual communication or online communication. This certainly happens in the charity sector. My wife, she does a lot within the charity sector that is doing reports, etc., social media, tourism, construction. Indeed, one of the companies that has signed up for the apprenticeship is, they're a construction company, but they've got they're developing their creative services department. And if you think about it, a lot of these non-creative companies that have a need for creative jobs within there, a lot of them might be outsourcing a lot of their creative services to an agency, quite a high cost. And certainly this is an opportunity for them to maybe start their own creative department within their company, and develop that through the 3 years, so that they can maybe all the basic work that needs to be done doesn't need to be outsourced to agencies. So that's certainly another area that we see as a growth area, particularly in this. The way that I actually developed this kind of strategy for this was that, so rather than just starting with a blank page, basically the apprenticeship has been adapted from modules across the art and creative industry faculty. And it really, so all the modules that you saw previously from the 3 years are really taken, they're adapted and developed from graphic design, digital media communication, advertising, PR and branding. That's the degree that I teach on in a traditional form at the moment. And obviously this, as we start thinking about changes, these initiating change, then the way that it's going to work is the way that it's proposed to work, that I've been developing it, it's a 40-week program. It's going to start in January, and it's going to end in December. So, and the employers that I've spoken to have said that actually works really well for them. That actual the start date of January is very, very good for them. But obviously, as we move forward, start dates, are potentially fluid in this particular situation as well. And obviously we've got the blended learning approach to this, online discussion forums, and we can use different bits of technology. Apptem, which is a particular type of it's kind of like a VLE, but it's specifically developed for apprenticeships. And so we're going to launch, as I've said, in January 2024. So I, as a graphic designer, I like to use my little data things. So I've been using Notion to actually map out all the different module outlines, and we can the modules here, so we can see here that we've got the modules down the left, we've got the tasks, we've got the learning outcomes, we've got the duties that are needed in there, linking back to the duties from the apprenticeship standard, then the assignments, and then we've got the KSBs linked there. So one more for you as well. Also, like to do my little Gantt chart as well. So I've got my little Gantt chart, which, as we can see, works over a year. So we've embedded points, because obviously we can see that it's going to be quite challenging for a lot of students to do this, because it's, they're working and they're studying at the same time. So obviously we put a summer break in there, because I think that there's going to be a period here where, I don't know, they might need some sort of catching up on some of the work. I envisage that, that's going to be necessary. Obviously, they need to take a break as well. They need to take some break as well at the time. But basically, that's how it works. So it's incremental learning in that sense that you do one. Obviously, there's a PDP that runs through the whole year, but that feeds into all of the modules as they go through. So there's they link into all that all the way through. But apart from that, all the other modules they're incremental. You finish one and then you move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. So yeah, I just wanted to just quickly talk about the apprentices. So obviously we haven't started this program yet, so we don't have any data on how the apprentices, what they think are the good bits and bad bits of being an apprentice and learning and studying at work. But in 2022, I was invited by University of Grants well, it was actually in London. I didn't actually have to go out to Austria for this, but I was invited to do a talk on creative industries in the UK, and for master students on a content strategy course. So that's kind of slightly closely linked to the creative industry. Not quite the same. I understand that. But they basically their course was equivalent to what we would call a degree apprenticeship. So at the end of it, I said, I asked if it was all right to do a quick survey of the students and those 23 their apprentices, however we want to call them. I wanted to find out what they thought the advantages and disadvantages were of working and studying. So there's 23 participants altogether. And this is what came out. So, and obviously, this is not in a paper. This is just something I did because it was presented to me. It was available to me to do at the time. So the pros were in-work experience, networking, a regular wage, online and asynchronous learning, which I was kind of quite surprised about actually, because I know some of our students aren't particularly keen on that. But this idea of constant development as well. And I think that maybe if you're in a work environment and there's constant changes of different types of jobs coming in, that I can see how that will work. But also, if you look at the cons, I mean, it's probably not. It's unsurprising what the cons are. Highly demanding workload. That came top. Most people said that straight away. That we have that the demand for obviously workplace and trying to do it. There's no leisure time. Highly pressured and stressful. Difficult to manage time, and that some found it quite overwhelming. So these are things that need to be borne in mind as we move forward. And obviously, I'm hoping that certainly over the next period, when we get to the apprenticeship running, I'm going to be able to check out and find these out with our actual apprentices as well. So coming to to sort of finish off now, really wanted to just look at some of the opportunities and challenges that we found throughout this whole period. So I mean, I wanted to again think about my students that I teach at the moment, and this is completely different from my day. The vast majority of students today, they have a job, and most of them. The sad thing about it really is that most of the jobs are unrelated to their studies or course. So, a lot of them, high proportion are low wage, 0 hours, gig economy, and a high proportion of there's still a very high proportion of unpaid internships within the industry. And I think the idea is that they a lot of these companies sell the idea of an internship as, well, you're going to be working in a really glamorous industry, but in my experience, it ain't that glamorous really. It might appear that way, but that's the way they sell it. And there's been really lots of examples, really poor practice, certainly in my day, and I'm sure there's many now. But I know from our from MDX Works, which looks after a lot of the employment for students, that there's so many unpaid internships, you could easily find somebody an intern, an unpaid internship.
Tim, I'm going to break in now. We've
Yeah.
only got about 20 minutes left, and we've got some questions
Okay.
in the chat.
Okay, right. I'm two slides to go.
Slides, brilliant.
Okay. So just
Thank
one
you,
more
Tim.
thing. I just want to say, this isn't I just want to talk about, this came out in campaign last week, and I think that we need to remember that, from creative industry's point of view, that this is happening all the way down the pipeline as well. There's underfunding within the arts right down to the schools and things like that. That's something that needs to be addressed. Just to back up, to finish, DAs are not, I'm not saying that these are an alternative, but I'm saying it's another option. Sometimes employers want more than a degree, develop in a workplace knowledge, skills and behaviors, gain real industry experience, less financial burden, earning while you learn, potential for high demand workload. There's been a bit of a fact shift. You can quickly read through that. I think we've gone through that. And to be continued, looking at this. There you go. There you go. Thank you. I was that through the last few slides. Okay, I'm done. I'm finished.
Brilliant, Tim. No, absolutely fabulous. And again, Tim is going to go back and be able to present these slides so we can send these out to you. Really interesting research that you did, Tim, especially the statistics, as you said when we were talking before the presentation started, the statistics that go into the thinking behind it and the research that's gone into the thinking behind your work has been fantastic. I'm actually going to close off the recording now, and we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Tim Riley.